so on the subject of guns, obviously there's several reasons for having guns. Personal defense, defense from dangerous animals, recreation, hunting come to mind. But recreation's, you can do other things for recreation, and hunting isn't really necessary in society.
Correct.
And for personal protection, there's other options such as tasers.
Yep.
So, in light of that, and how many people die in violent gun shootings, which, while compared to like things like car accidents is insignificant, it's still pretty big. How would you justify having gun ownership and like licensing so prevalent in America? Because we have significantly more gun deaths than other countries.
Oh, that's definitely true. First of all, the gun is not the murderer. We can all agree that if there's a room full of guns, the guns don't kill anybody. That somebody comes in and picks up the gun and uses the gun to kill somebody. And that the gun is not at fault for that. Now you can make the case that it makes it easier to kill people. I'm going to get to that in a second. But the gun doesn't just jump up and shoot people randomly. It's a piece of steel like an automobile or like a carving knife or like a microphone or anything else. I can come over and start clubbing you with this microphone if I want to, but that's not the microphone's fault. Now I do agree, and I'm not trying to be disingenuous here, guns are designed to kill people. That's what they're there for. This business about hunting and stuff, I know there are hunters out there, but basically I've got an AR-15 and I've got a .45 sidearm, okay? I have the .45 sidearm to kill bad guys at close range, and I have the AR to make sure they don't get into close range. And I'm not hypocritical about this. I have the sidearm to defend myself and my apartment, and I have the rifle to defend my block. Because I don't like seeing people get hurt. I'm not going to use that gun for aggression and crime. I'm going to use it to prevent aggression and crime. So now we get to the issue of what is a gun really? If it's an inert object, why do people have this thing about it? There's a cartoon I just loved. It was great. It's two people talking and there's a body on the ground. And in the first panel, the guy says, "You beat that person to death. What's wrong with you?" In the second panel, the guy says, "You strangled that person to death. What's wrong with you?" In the third panel, he's got a knife. He says, You stabbed that person to death. What's wrong with you?" In the fourth panel, they shot that person and they said, "You shot that person to death. We got to do something about guns." It's not a joke. Because what that is basically doing is saying that the problem is not with the gun, the problem is in the heart of the people that commit the crime, and that's a much harder problem to solve. But let me give you the basics of why I think that guns are important. All throughout history, and any reading of history will tell you, that there have basically been two different kinds of people. There are peaceful villagers who farm and create things, and they generate wealth, and they live peacefully, and they raise their children, and the mom's happy, everybody's happy, everything's great, they live in a village, and periodically, people come riding over the hill, bands of armed men who are professional warriors, they've been training with weapons their entire lives, and they come riding over the hill, and they murder these people, and they take the stuff that they could never make, and they rape the women, and they take the children, and they take them back to be slaves. And 20 years later, this whole thing starts again. Now, if you are dealing with a guy who's a professional warrior who practices with swords for 5 hours, 10 hours a day for 25 years, and you pick up a pitchfork, your chance against him is 0. Guns are the great equalizer, because a gun means that an 80-pound woman in a parking lot has a chance to stop 3 men who are 250 pounds each. It equalizes her right to self-defense. So now the question is, do you have a right to self-defense? And there's a story I like a lot about this. Have any of you ever seen the wildlife movies of the orcas, and the orcas will drag seals right up onto the beach, and they corner the seals up against the beach, and the seals start going up the beach, and then the orca jumps up and grabs it, takes it back up? Well, I've seen those, and I'm always on the side of the seal, needless to say, always on the side of the seal. And I saw one of these, and this is exactly what happened. This seal came jumping out of the surf. This orca, this gigantic monster, comes roaring right after it, and it's got these giant teeth, and it's got its mouth open, and it goes chomp, and it missed the seal by that much, and then the seal turned around and bit that orca on the nose. Just turned around and bit him on the nose. And I remember after watching that, I said, is there anybody here who thinks that that the seal doesn't have the right to do that? Is there anybody who thinks that it's wrong for that seal to try and bite that orca on the nose after it just escaped with its life? Because I don't think anybody could make that case. I think the seal's got a right to defend itself. I think antelopes have a right to have horns, because horns help protect the antelope and the baby antelopes and the female antelopes from the lions. And if you're talking about gun control, you're talking about taking weapons away from the innocent, from the prey, and that's somehow going to reduce the predators. If I saw all of the horns off of a gazelle, that doesn't make less lions. Or fewer lions. That makes more easy victims. And the easier the victims are, the more the lions are going to breed. And the more the lions breed, the more lions there are going to be. So, I want to make things hard for the criminal. And what you find, by the way, and the reason I think this is true and not just theory, if you look at the crime areas in America, murder, violent crimes, property crimes, the areas that have the most guns are the areas that have the lowest crime. And the reason is very simple. The predator, the criminal, will not go into that house because he doesn't know if he's going to come back out again. That has a deterrent effect, right? It deters people. If you don't know whether you're going to get shot going into that house, you probably won't go. So there you go. So look, I don't think the steel is the issue. I think the human heart is the issue. I have weapons, and I'm never going to use those weapons to harm people. I expect I'll never have to use those weapons at all. But if I do, I'll use them to defend me and the people I love and the people I care about who haven't done anything to anybody. And if you want to deprive me of the right to defend myself, you've deprived me of the fundamental right that I have as a person, which is to survive. Right? Guns are the equalizers. A person can pick up a gun and in 5 minutes work that gun pretty much as well as a person's been practicing with a gun. Well, certainly in my case, you know, people come out on the range and they pick up a gun and put them right through the target, and I'm lucky if I can hit the east. If I can hit east, I'm happy. But it's true. And so it equalizes the ability to defend yourself. Now, the problem with that is there's absolutely true that we have these gun murders, and it's absolutely true that just about look, if somebody goes in and shoots up a college, there's something wrong with that guy, right? That's not something you do because you had a bad day. I've had plenty of bad days. I've never killed anybody. I've shot at a few of them, but I've missed them. So, what are we really talking about here? It is true that we have more of these shootings because guns are more available in America, and I'm not going to be disingenuous enough to say that's not true. But the problem is not the gun. The problem is you've got a guy who's mentally ill, and the main problem, the reason we're starting to see so many of these things that we never saw before, is because now, if you've got a kid who's really disturbed and suicidal, and he feels like he's nothing, and he feels like no one's ever paid attention to him, and no one's ever listened to him, now all of a sudden, this guy has a way to make it on the NBC Evening News and have his face on every single newspaper and be known all around the world. And if you're going to check on out, you might as well check on out that way. Dylan and Clay